Welcome to the 12th episode of the 4th series of the Women in CX podcast, a series dedicated to real talk conversations between women in customer experience. Listen in as we share our career stories, relive the moments that shaped us, and voice our opinions as loudly as we like about all manner of CX subjects. I'll be your host, Clare Muscutt, and in today's episode, I'll be talking to one of our community members, a seriously fabulous CX queen from the UK. Let me introduce you to today's inspiring guest. She's a renowned customer experience and service design practitioner in UK supermarket retail, with over 15 years' experience in operational leadership. She spent time working in John Lewis department stores, where she developed omnichannel propositions for fashion, beauty and home, and is currently the Senior Customer Experience Lead for UK supermarket Waitrose Partners. Please welcome to the show, CX sister Ellie Sutton. Hi Ellie.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, wonderful. I'm joined by the Waitrose summer fruit and berry selection.
Oh, it looks delicious, making me hungry. Well, welcome to the Women in CX podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and welcome to everybody listening along at home as well. So, Ellie, we're just going to jump straight in with the first question that I always ask every guest that comes on the show. How did you find your way into CX and where you are today?
I have worked in food retail for pretty much all of my working career. But actually, I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I should have had a sort of insight a good few years ago when I was choosing what degree to do at university, and was in a bookshop and decided to pick up a book called The Anthropology of Shopping, which was all about like how brands and how retailers basically kind of work with the people that they want to sell their things to. So as a result of picking up that book, I actually studied archaeology and anthropology at university, which was amazing. And loved the study of anthropology, kind of delving into kind of how and why people think and do things the way that they do, and as a result of that moved into food retail as a graduate trainee. So I've worked for the last 10 years or so in the operations side of things, so leading branches across southern England, and then kind of areas within that of Waitrose all the way through. And then began to, I suppose, kind of understand that I had a slightly different way of approaching things, where I would really kind of listen to the customers that I was talking to on the shop floor, and then get little teams of people in my branches together to go, the customer's giving us this piece of feedback, like what can we do about it? What's kind of within our gift? And began to realize that way of thinking wasn't quite the same as lots of my colleagues, of kind of knitting that customer and operations stuff together. So then began to kind of think there must be a way to do this with a bit more of a broader reach. So got a central CX role, and moved in. I was really honoured actually to kind of move into John Lewis first of all, and I worked with the director of customer experience over in JL. Went to the department store in England, and worked with him as his business development manager for probably about 18 months or so. And then when a CX role came up in Waitrose, to get back to my passion for food and kind of that industry, I snapped it up, and that's where I am today.
Oh, I love this story, and so much resonated with me, even just in the first couple of minutes. I'd not even thought about this ever till now. That something really similar happened to me. I was doing my master's in marketing and actually wrote my thesis on the cathedrals of consumption, which was actually about retail experience. I didn't end up working in retail for like another 10 years, but there must have been something that like kind of sparked the interest, like your book on the anthropology of retailing. But also like coming from a retail background myself, for anyone who doesn't know, I spent 5 years working at Sainsbury's, which was a competitor to Waitrose when I was there back in the day. But really very much experiencing, especially in the food side of retailing, that the job to do was very much putting stuff on shelves, keeping things clean, and that was the limitation, especially back in the day of that. So being kind of like an early lead in doing things and thinking about things differently, it must have been hard because you were in an environment that most people didn't think and act that way. So props to you, girl. So I'm really interested, especially about kind of having been a woman in operations at that time. I was a woman in hospitality operations at a similar age. It was hard for me, but recognizing how kind of male dominated store management was when I worked in retail, even though I was on the head office side at the time. Tell me more about kind of the challenges you had to overcome to become the woman you are today.
Yeah, it's really interesting looking back at it, and I do remember having kind of moments sort of in your early and mid-20s where I'd walk into rooms for kind of operational, field outings and kind of conferences and things, and literally looking around and seeing, just almost trying to, pick out the other women that were there, because it would just be this completely male-dominated industry at that stage, and actually, in the brand that I've been working in, primarily kind of men wearing chinos and sort of Gant polo shirts. There was definitely
I'm
definitely a
literally
uniform.
Yeah, and like the women tended to be like the HR business partners, didn't they? Really,
Yeah.
as opposed to the operators.
It was totally kind of gender stereotypes playing out. But I look back with it at it with almost a fondness of the fact that I think I was able to see that as an opportunity, and really kind of feel the responsibility that was on my shoulders to kind of make sure that I was bringing a different viewpoint and a different kind of way of thinking to that room, and to make sure my voice was being heard at those points, rather than necessarily just kind of wilting into the background of those environments. So I think in some ways it made me become the kind of advocate for myself that I am today, of kind of speaking up for in a way that I think is appropriate. So in some ways I look back at it and think it was a positive, but not one that I would ever want kind of the next cohort of leaders to have to replicate.
Yeah, tell me, let's unpick that a little bit more. So you're saying that like being in that environment where you were the only one, it meant that you had to fight harder to be heard and
I
practice
think
that.
so. And I think men and women think differently, and especially in a food retail environment, the majority of people that are using those those places to shop are the like it or not, the women of the household kind of coming in and kind of choosing. That was our key audience, and yet we're running these multi-million-pound business units in some cases through a total male perspective. So I think kind of, just even, things like how you would approach customer service and how you would talk to people, and the kind of training that you would give people of kind of, helping mums with kids in trolleys, and the thing that those tiny little bits of the customer experience that for that mum with a newborn baby that's screaming and a toddler that kind of is demanding an ice cream or whatever it is, being able to see that through a sort of female perspective, and actually then empower your team to say, well, just go and make a difference, buy, whip a magazine off the shelf and give that to the toddler because it's got some plastic tat on the front of it, and very much kind of move away to see the the holistic picture here of all of those incremental pieces that would make a difference to the customer experience, rather than necessarily, and again, being focused on wastage percentages or shrinkage or staff turnover. You've got to be able to take a step back in those positions, and I think women have that ability to do that in and bring a slightly different perspective to it. And I'm not sure I would have got that had I not been forced to be kind of that voice in the room, and kind of feel like I could step up and give that different opinion.
And no
So
doubt
yeah,
educate your colleagues along
totally.
along the way. So yeah, like I'm just going to warn all of our listeners now. I think we're going to seriously geek out talking about supermarket retailing. um, but like I'm thinking back to like, I left in 2017, and it was, I guess, the pre-pandemic landscape. And I remember sitting in our meetings initially with Justin King and then later with Mike Coop, and we'll always be looking at kind of performance of the big four at one point in time. So us, Asda, Morrison's and Tesco. And all of a sudden there was this huge shift in terms of market share, and the discounter brands appeared and started to disrupt the classic equation of big four. And then all of a sudden, like Waitrose and M&S started to be eating away at the market share of the big four. And I would always be like looking up and thinking, like, what is it that Waitrose are doing? Like, your growth was massive, wasn't it? You increased the footprint hugely, but there was clearly a demand for an alternative to traditional generic supermarkets that competed on price. And whilst the price became something that the discounters were beating the generic supermarkets on and became their USP, there was this kind of quality aspect up at the top of the tree with you guys. I was always a bit jealous, actually. I very much admired Waitrose and their customer experience. I'd go and like take photos of what you guys were up to and things like counters and and space. So sorry, that's a little admission there. But yeah, I'm just like interested to see kind of a bit more about what it was on your side, because you know what you guys were up to and what the discounters were up to was a real opportunity for me and customer experience in the supermarket retailing lens to help the business see how customer experience, whether it was through online or through in-store or propositions, new propositions, things like click and collect, could create destination stores or more seamless experiences in line with the amount of data we had. But yeah, I'm just curious, like, what was it like for you? And during the pandemic, what was going on in the supermarket space?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back, there was definitely kind of probably around sort of 2015, 2017 was the Waitrose heyday in terms of we had a business strategy that was called VEG, which was volume, efficiency, and growth, and definitely the growth element of things was something that we absolutely nailed in terms of that strategy. And I think one of the things that was our key to being able to unlock that was sort of brand assurance, and exactly to what you kind of talk about, you ended up in the UK food retail market with having really assured brands at the bottom, kind of the discounters, the Aldi and Lidl, and what they were able to do to sort of disrupt that market. And then you had this space at the top that Waitrose and Marks and Spencers were able to kind of step into, to say, well, we are never, and Waitrose and Marks and Spencers are smaller, so in terms of sort of our buying power and our ability to rival the big four, we were never ever going to be able to compete on price. And interestingly, from a customer perspective, we have a huge amount of sort of history and brand reputation that I think we were really able to leverage during that time, to say, I know that we were really trying to step into that best 5%. We knew that we were never going to be number 5, and that going after that element of volume was going to be it. But if we could grow our estate to make sure that enough of the country had access to Waitrose, and I guess we started with the physical, and then that was sort of fairly quickly moved into our kind of digital and our DFCs and things like that, and how we could kind of capture the online market. And I think all of that time now, the kind of investment in our store so that we have this large estate across the country, and that's also in sort of petrol station forecourts, it's in welcome breaks. We were able to kind of find all of those sort of niche areas that we could just tap into and kind of put in the Waitrose brand to just be able to get out to more customers. I think the other bit that Waitrose were a real disruptor in at that point was the loyalty program, and free coffee was one
That
of
was
the kind
it.
of
Free
yeah.
coffee. Yes. I remember.
But that was such an interesting time in the company, and it was so interesting being sort of part of the team when we were landing that and hearing kind of what it was going to do from a marketing perspective, and actually it really kind of different. It's an interesting element of just a completely different angle that you could take on loyalty compared to your Tesco Club cards and your Nectar points, etc. And it really worked as a footfall driver. So a big expansion of the store estate, then kind of keeping people in by giving them a free cup of coffee every time, and all of a sudden kind of you're there and your brand is getting kind of more and more noticed, and the quality and the of the product, etc., then kind of goes hand in hand. But it also, I think that it comes with a responsibility of the brand in terms of how we maintain that customer experience. There is, we look at some of the things that Aldi and Lidl and things can get away with at the other end. So we look at things like our payment strategy and, what you can get away with at that point. And, in Waitrose, if you've got, our customers want to go in, and if you've got one person in the queue in front of you, that's not good enough for a Waitrose. Whereas you go into Aldi and Lidl and there's like two checkouts open, and it's back through the store, and you're like, why don't my customers accept this? But you understand that you have a responsibility to the brand and to the expectations you've set with your customers, that just isn't going to happen. I think we've definitely been able to create this niche within the marketplace, but it's then our challenge as a customer experience team to then figure out kind of how do you maintain that. And especially at the moment, Marks and Spencer's are flying in terms of their in-store proposition, and the latest Stevenage branch and things is really interesting. So it definitely feels at the moment like we've got some work to do. We're the ones now going into other supermarkets, taking the pictures and being like, I want to do that.
Oh, fascinating. And I think it's a really important point there, isn't it? So with higher prices and quality comes an increased expectation, and the brand creating that expectation alongside it that has to therefore then be consistently delivered. But the increase in operating costs that comes with, especially in store, being able to do that, and maintaining a margin and a sustainable business model. Like we had to go through like significant labor cost cutting when things got difficult. This was kind of back 2016, 17. Did that kind of affect you guys, or was your price and your margin stable enough to...
I think that is a constant challenge for us us as a business, and especially when you're reading the headlines and things at the moment. As you say, the pandemic actually was again one of those heydays, that golden era for shops, when we kind of look back at that, and especially for food retail, because there was nowhere else to go. So in some ways, kind of coming out the back of that, and then everything that we're reading about, cost of living crisis and potential recessions and food inflation, we cannot rest on our laurels in terms of understanding that price is a massive influencer for all of our customers. You can't just say that you're going to be the best 5%, and your customers are immune from these kind of elements in the press and everything they're talking about. So again, it's a real balance of having that responsibility for your customers to be doing the right thing in terms of cost of goods and how much they're paying for that, and then the amount of money left over to continue to invest in new propositions and innovation that you would want to be seeing us do. That's a very live conversation and challenge for us at the moment.
And I guess like digital changed everything, didn't it? But the pandemic accelerated
Yeah.
digital. So like being able to fulfill groceries through online, being able to provide click and collect, non-food click and collect. I know we spoke about this earlier today about, you know, kind of integrating food and non-food in those shopping journeys. But being able to kind of join all of that together into an ecosystem with the aspect of data, because we get so much, don't we, from supermarket shopping, like being able to understand and know customers probably better than anybody, because we see what they put into their baskets and what ranges they shop in, etc. But it is a really interesting time again, because
it was, I mean, and again, from, I mean, the expedition of our kind of digital abilities and the number of slots that we had. I mean, I think outside of the pandemic, it probably would have taken us a 5 to 10 year business plan to open the number of slots that we were then magically able to do. I mean, Britain loves a crisis, and we totally respond in those sorts of situations with that sort of war mentality of like, yes, we can do this, we're going to get on it. And from a sort of service design and proposition development, it was I'm kind of sat here thinking, why can't I replicate the speed at which I was able to work kind of 18 months ago, and how we were able to just kind of knock through barriers and things like that. So we were really able to speed up the ability, our ability to offer the digital and the online service. I think there's probably now that sort of settling period of the combination of how customers want to shop moving forward, and there is absolutely no doubt that bricks and mortar kind of supermarket retailing is not dead. We need to continue to invest in our store estates, but equally kind of having that the ability for customers to shop online, and how you knit those two together so they're not two entirely separate sort of business units. Because from a customer, I'm like, well, it's the same brand. I just, sometimes I'm having a party and I want it all delivered to me, and you should know, to your point about data, you should know that that's what I like to have. And those kind of expectations of how you deliver a truly kind of omni-channel experience. I think that's probably the challenge for us now, kind of post-pandemic, to see which behaviours have actually kind of landed as being permanent behavioural shifts than just the kind of the in pandemic reaction, because there's no other way to shop, etc.
I'm intrigued. Like, do you have like too many slots available now? Has that had to decrease, or is it kind of still got the uptake that it had? Now people have changed their behavior because they got used to being able to shop online and avoid queues, even though yours are only for one person deep.
Yeah. Oh, well, I can't say that they always are, but
you know what I
mean. We're definitely not at capacity. But again, it's interesting for the supermarket industry has to be able to respond to those magical 4 days of the year pre-Christmas. So which makes or breaks a food retailer's kind of year, to be honest, both in terms of actual results and how you kind of leave the year feeling professionally. So I think, despite the fact that actually, for a lot of the time we're not at capacity, it gives you confidence in the experience that customers can have at those times of the year that matter the most. So Christmas and Easter stand out as the biggest ones. So we at least know that we're in a good place to be able to deliver that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pick up on 2 points here. And the first one is about stores and online not being two discrete business units. Like when I was at Sainsbury's, retail and digital were still felt very, very separate. And the director of operations at the time, I was constantly like rallying this call around needing to bring digital and retail together and having like a kind of unified CX and UX team to help them to do that. But it became apparent it wasn't going to happen in my lifetime. And funnily enough, I ran into him. He's now the CEO of Sainsbury's, and I saw him at an awards dinner actually, and he was like, he saw me and he was like, Claire, we did it, we brought them together. Only in the last 12 months, and I was like, oh my god, amazing. But that kind of challenge of historical disparity being one of the biggest challenges that business at the time did need to overcome in order to be able to deliver seamless omni-channel, which was the goal. Personalized experiences that integrated the data together. But the second thing I have to talk about is Christmas. It was called, for listeners, the Golden Quarter, and as Eddie said, such a huge reliance on that quarter being the make or break of the end of year, right? And the financial performance sitting with that, but also the Christmas adverts.
Yeah,
that was always a war, wasn't it? Seems a bit less so these days. But I remember like my heyday of CX in food retailing was having kind of proven CX design and proposition development outside of marketing, being able to, when we moved into marketing in one of the very many restructures that customer experience got moved around in, but actually being within that division and having Christmas and this golden quarter as an opportunity to design propositions and services and design experiences around this kind of campaign experience, both on and offline and in contact centers. And the message around the Christmas advert was what we used to do exactly what you were talking about earlier, which was, being more than just a brand statement. We talk about live well for less all year round, but at Christmas it was for sharing. So being able to use that as the inspiration around designing concepts and experiences that we trialed well before Christmas and ended up rolling out literally across the whole estate. And when I say whole estate, I'm talking about like 190,000 employees, 32 million customers, like absolutely a huge scale. So I was just super interested in kind of, for you, like the challenges and opportunities. Where are you taking service design, CX design, and proposition development these days? Like, you don't have to tell me exactly what you're working on, but what does that look like for you?
So I think it's a really interesting time to be able to kind of look at what is that next stage in terms of, and probably the integration of kind of digital into a kind of proposition design as well. And I don't mean that in terms of the kind of I don't mean that in terms of online shopping, but in terms of how do we use technology to enhance propositions. And equally, so with the brand that I work in, there are certain elements that kind of sit within it from a service perspective, from a kind of product knowledge, and what do people expect from our brand when we're looking at new propositions. So and I kind of referred to it right at the beginning of one of the things that I think is I've really loved doing in this role is knitting that kind of operational execution of it, because quite often you can sit and have a wonderful idea and kind of that understanding of what you think your customers might like, but actually
100%.
Food retailing is so fast paced. There are our poor partners, as we call them, staff in Waitrose branches that are being bombarded by 20 different things to do. Overly complex propositions just do not work as well as kind of really simple things. So, but equally those simple things need to be kind of really empowering and exciting for a customer to be feeling. So my current remit at the moment is looking at our future propositions, our food service counters. So a lot of our competitors, Sainsbury's being one of them, have taken all of them out. And for us, we really believe that our fish counter, our meat counter, our cheese and deli, all of them should be kind of our showcase platforms for experiential retailing, the best of the best in terms of product and service. So I am properly loving this role of being able to kind of say, what does, and you go into, other places like Italy and, you know, leaner stores and some of those amazing kind of, you know, more independent style retailers, and like, how can I cherry pick elements of those, you know, bits of proposition and put them into a kind of, you know, mass market supermarket you know, idea. So that's the kind of challenge that I've been set at the moment is, you know, we think that they should be our brand point of difference, but they, you know, they need to be relevant for customers. They need to be probably, yeah, more digitally enabled than they are at the moment. They should be bringing that theatre and that, you know, experience whilst, and this is the challenge, still being commercially viable.
Yeah.
And you know, delivering from a commercial perspective. So I've certainly got my work cut out for me at the moment from a kind of service design and proposition perspective, but I'm loving it.
Oh my God, we should like totally compare notes, because that was one of my major projects. Obviously my stuff will be a bit out of date now, but I had exactly the same challenge.
Yeah.
Obviously it didn't stick around because they've all been ripped out from that side, but I remember just like thinking about like Morrison's, for example. They showcased that Market Street, didn't they?
Yeah.
We still, I don't know, I've not been to a Morrison's for such a long time. I don't even know if they're down south, you know. I used to live up north. But the kind of like the theatre all happening very clearly at the front of store. But whereas like Waitrose counters seem to be like quite hidden away, don't they? And
Yeah, I mean, they tend to be kind of the
at the back,
back wall of
yeah.
the supermarket. So yeah, I mean, part of it will be working.
Where do they
Yeah,
go?
my customer experience team has store development as part of it. So it is really interesting to be able to kind of develop the propositions and then hand that over to our, so you know, as and when we're refitting or refurbishing branches, you've kind of built those principles of which the kind of proposition should be then rolled out into across the estate. So you never know, in a couple of years' time, you might begin to see some funky new counters kind of appearing at the start of a customer journey rather than kind of halfway through.
I tell you what though, like you can take the girl out of supermarkets, but still to this day, like wherever I go, if I ever go on, like wherever I go on holiday or I'm traveling, I'm still resisting the urge to pull my phone out and take photos of what's going on in a supermarket.
Yeah.
It's once it's in your veins, isn't it? Well, that's
Totally.
well, it's been awesome to chat to you today, Ellie. Unfortunately, our listeners are going to have to go. But what would your top piece of advice or key takeaway be for women in CX listening along?
I think kind of reflecting on my personal journey, the one piece that I wish I'd given to my kind of 20-year-old self was about being your own advocate. I think you know, I knew that this was kind of the route that I wanted to take, but I think I spent kind of the majority of my 20s either waiting to be given permission by somebody or kind of expecting somebody to kind of set this magical career pathway for me. And yeah, I think actually kind of the penny dropped around kind of, well, I can make this happen. It might take a bit of persistence, but I have a real passion for kind of, you know, brands making sure that their customers are being listened to and they're being heard, and then, you know, what we can do from a service design and proposition development to actually bring that to life. And yeah, I wish that I'd kind of given myself permission to kind of tap into some of that and explore what was out there kind of a few years earlier, because yeah, I think it's amazing. And you know, don't be afraid to ask for support within that. So you know, be your best advocate, and you know, reach out to those amazing people around you, because you know, everybody, you know, that I've asked for help, and especially joining a network such as Women in CX, it's so supportive and lovely to kind of, you know that other people are there to help you on that mission, if you just take that gamble and kind of put yourself out there in the first place.
And also I think being part of the community and the network is seeing that we've all got very similar shared challenges as women, and actually how rare it is for women to advocate for themselves in the way that they advocate for customers. So I think that's a really important point to land on. And yeah, we should absolutely be championing ourselves more, and as you say, you know, collaborating with other women or in the community for sure. to champion one another and each other's voices, and ensure that we have that feeling of empowerment that we can advocate for ourselves as well as our customers and customer experience. So that's a great point to end on. Just like to say thank you so much for geeking out with me today.
Pleasure.
I got so excited thinking back to some of those memories. It definitely was a very special time in my career for sure, and very excited to see what you and Waitrose do next in the customer experience, service design and proposition space.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure to geek out with you too, Claire. I can't do it anytime.
Yay. We'll definitely be doing it some more. So thanks to everybody for listening along as well, and we'll see you all next time. Bye for now. Bye, Ellie. Thanks for listening to the Women in CX podcast with me, Clare Muscutt. If you enjoyed the show, please drop us a like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever platform you're listening or watching on. And if you want to know more about becoming a member of the world's first online membership community for women in customer experience, please check out our website, womenincx.community, and follow the Women in CX page on LinkedIn. Join us again next time, where I'll be talking to one of our community members from the caucuses about female entrepreneurship and striking the right balance between CX strategy and implementation. See you all next time.